Thank you. Dear chairs, honorable members, thank you for inviting me to this exchange. On January 18, UNRWA was provided with information regarding the alleged involvement of 12 employees in the October 7 attacks, which the agency continues to unequivocally condemn. After cross-checking the identities of the 12 individuals against the database of 33,000 staff, the Commissioner General took a firm and immediate decision to terminate the contracts of the 10 staff members who remain alive. While no evidence in support of the allegations by the Israeli authorities have been shared with UNRWA, this extraordinary decision was taken to protect the agency's interests and its vital humanitarian operations. The UN Secretary General activated an independent, and I would like to repeat, an independent investigation by the highest investigative authority in the UN system. We are cooperating with this investigative team, which is now in the region. Full collaboration by the Israeli authorities is essential for this investigation. Before these allegations were made, UNRWA had already requested a full independent review of the agency to assess its internal mechanisms against possible breaches of neutrality. This review is being led by Madame Colonna, former French foreign minister, who will work with 3 reputable European organizations to complete the review. Like any other UN organization, UNRWA employs robust vetting and due diligence measures. These were confirmed by the recent review conducted by DG NEAR and also by member states after the 7 of October attacks. We also provide a list of employees to the host authorities in the countries where we operate and to the Israeli authorities. We never received any complaints, including on the 12 alleged staff members. Today, 16 donors decided to suspend their funding pending the outcome of the investigation. Other donors decided to continue their support. Other donors increased their contributions. Unless suspension decisions are reversed, UNRWA will not be able to run its operations in Gaza and across the region beyond the end of February. This is how serious it is. At a time in which a humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding before our eyes. Let me turn to the situation in Gaza. Reportedly, more than 28,000 people have been killed. 1.7 million people have been displaced, many of them multiple times seeking protection and assistance in our shelters. More than half of the population is now cramped in Rafah, an area that is hosting 6 times more population than before the war. The conditions are beyond words, are appalling. Hunger, disease, and death amidst panic as the conflict is intensifying in the south. There is nowhere to flee. UNRWA is delivering assistance in extremely difficult circumstances. In January, only 16% of missions to deliver aid to the north were facilitated by Israel. Vital materials, including medical equipment and parts to repair water facilities, were rejected. Our convoys to the north have been hit in 3 different occasions. Last time we were able to deliver aid to the north was on the 23rd of January. Allow me to pay tribute to the 156 employees that have been killed and to all UNRWA staff who risk their lives on a daily basis. 3,000 UNRWA staff choose to continue working with unparalleled dedication, providing food, medicines, health, and comfort. Among them, Nasser, who works around the clock, shuttling with his team between the Rafah crossing and the logistic base, where aid is coordinated and distributed to shelters. Dr. Sulafa, mother of 5, who prepares medical packages for the displaced. Honourable members, the ruling of the International Court of Justice mandates immediate and effective action to facilitate the provision of urgently required basic services and humanitarian aid. But instead, UNRWA is just a few weeks away from being forced to end its operations. No other agency has the capacity to deliver as UNRWA. The agency is the fragile thread currently holding up the humanitarian response together. If this thread is broken, the entire humanitarian operation in Gaza will fall into pieces. The consequences of the suspension of funding have a human face. We are talking about the survival of more than 2 million people in Gaza, but also across the region. 250,000 children are attending our schools in the West Bank, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. Cancer patients depend on our support for hospitalization. Newborn babies and chronic patients will no longer have access to treatment. Close to 1 million people in the region, the poorest of the poor, rely on our social safety net and emergency cash assistance. The impact is not just humanitarian. It is being perceived in the region as a withdrawal of international support for a just and peaceful resolution of the conflict. Suspension of our operations in all fields will put at risk peace and stability in the region and the prospect of a transition period, something that our Commission General mentioned yesterday, in which basic public services will need to be restored. Distinguished members, we are grateful that the European Union, our third largest donor, has not suspended funding. We understand the concerns that the serious allegations raise. We have acted firmly, and we are working closely with the Commission. During this legislative term, this House has constantly played a key role in supporting UNRWA. For 75 years, lacking a political solution, UNRWA has worked to fulfill one of the most difficult missions ever entrusted to the UN, that of providing vital government-like services in a region riddled by instability, insecurity, and wars. For 75 years, we have hoped for the day when we could scale back and hand over our operations. But this should not happen due to allegations against 12 individual staff members. This cannot happen in one of the worst humanitarian crises. Until there is a lasting political solution, UNRWA must continue fulfilling its mandate. This devastating conflict, which threatens the wider region and is inflicting immense suffering, must stop. We cannot abandon the people in Gaza. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lorenzo, and of course also our condolences for the staff that UNRWA have lost. We will now continue with Commission. You will have 6 minutes each, and we will start with Mr. Gert-Jan Koopman, who is Director General at EJ NIR. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to all the honourable members and the other colleagues in the room. I would like to thank the Parliament, AFET and DEV for organising this meeting and inviting the Commission. It's very timely, as it comes just after meetings which the Commission had with UNRWA, including with the UNRWA Commissioner General, who also met the EU ministers yesterday. We've all listened to Marta's presentation just now, who has set out the UNRWA perspective. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that UNRWA has been playing a vital role over many years, supporting vulnerable Palestinian refugees in accessing essential services such as education and health. Therefore, we see the EU-UNRWA partnership as an element of key importance, and an enhanced dialogue with the agency is, of course, fundamental in this very complex, risky, and highly politicized environment in which it operates. Now, all of that is further strengthened by the horrendous attacks that took place against Israel on the 7th of October, and the very serious allegations made against 12 UNRWA staff, allegations suggesting that they were actively involved in the attack on Israel. So, as I said, we are in contact with UNRWA at all levels, and we have made it clear that we expect the agency to provide full transparency on the allegations and to take all the necessary measures, I repeat, all the necessary measures against staff involved as it is taking, and also to put in place remedial measures where necessary should any of these allegations be proven. So in this regard, we took note, of course, of the immediate decision which Marta referenced to preventively terminate the contracts of those staff members still alive. And we welcomed the internal investigation, which was swiftly launched by the UN, in fact, on the 28th of January. It's currently underway, and it is led by the highest investigative body of the UN, the Office of Internal Oversight Services in New York. Furthermore, we have welcomed the announcement by the UN Secretary-General on Monday, the 5th of February, to appoint an independent review group led by the former French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Madame Colonna, which is assessing the capacity of UNRWA to ensure neutrality and to ensure that the allegations of serious breaches are responded to when they are made. So obviously in the Commission we are very keen to receive any preliminary reports by OIOS and the independent review group. I should add that in our own apologies, in our own statement on the 29th of January, we clarified that we will determine our upcoming funding decisions in light of the outcome of the investigations announced by the UN agencies, the actions it will take. But we also clarified very clearly that there are three measures which we expect UNRWA to agree on, which we are taking from the perspective of protecting the EU budget. Let me briefly outline them for you. First, we expect UNRWA to agree to carrying out a system audit of the agency by EU-appointed independent external experts, focusing specifically on the control systems, notably with regards to staff, which in return can feed into the pillar assessment framework. I think it's important to realize, we discussed that last year, that UNRWA has been pillar assessed, so we have formally found through our auditors that the control systems are equivalent. But obviously these serious allegations warrant further inspection, and hence this system audit of the control systems might need to feed into the pillar assessment. That's the first ask the Commission has formulated. Secondly, we believe that it is important that UNRWA's Department of Internal Investigations, called DIOS, should be strengthened, considerably strengthened in terms of staffing, in terms of equipment, and also with regards to its governance. Thirdly, we believe that it is essential that a review of UNRWA staff is carried out to confirm that they did not participate in the attacks, but also forward-looking to ensure that the checks in this regard are robust. I'm happy to report that we had a very good meeting. I had a very good meeting together with Hans here and other colleagues in the Commission with the Commissioner General yesterday, who indicated openness on these three requests of the Commission. And in fact, our teams are now working with UNRWA to operationalize these three elements. I don't want to elaborate further. The work is ongoing, but I want to underline that we take that extremely seriously, and we also welcome the openness that UNRWA has shown in this regard. Now, the technical work is very important so that we can, I'll finish in a last sentence. The technical work is very important because when it comes to these conditions, the devil is in the detail, and the Commission is very keen to get this right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Koopman. I'm going to give the floor directly to Hans Das, Deputy Director General at DG ECHO, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, honourable members. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the invitation also to DG ECHO. So I will focus entirely on the humanitarian aspects of this. Marta has painted a very bleak humanitarian picture to which I cannot add much. But I nevertheless would like to recall that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is simply catastrophic by all standards. Many hospitals are out of service, extensive destruction of houses and infrastructure, and 80% of the population is displaced. A large part of the population in Gaza is on the brink of famine, and there are growing outbreaks of communicable diseases. Situation in and around Rafah is particularly worrying today, with huge numbers of displaced civilians concentrated in a very small area, and the number of civilian casualties that are being reported is simply alarming. 70% of casualties right now are women and children. It's important to recall the obligation on all parties in this respect to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure in line with international humanitarian law. Obviously, the intensity of the conflict greatly affects and undermines the ability of our humanitarian partners to reach people in need, and that's why you will hear the Commission continue to call for rapid, safe and unhindered humanitarian access and aid to reach those in need. I must say that aid flows into Gaza remain highly insufficient at this moment in time. In terms of the EU response, I want to recall that the EU has made over 200 million available in humanitarian funding for Palestine since the beginning of the present crisis and delivered over 1,600 tons of in-kind assistance. Coming to the issues related to UNRWA then, allow me to say first of all that within the context we just described, it is imperative that humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank continues unabated, as was also stated very clearly in the Commission statement of the 29th of January. And UNRWA happens to be the backbone of the humanitarian response in Gaza. It is supporting basic needs for IDPs in UNRWA-run shelters. It is providing health support. It's ensuring access to wash for many IDPs. Much of the humanitarian aid entering Gaza is transported on UNRWA trucks and is delivered to UNRWA warehouses. Other agencies or governmental actors would not be able to substitute for UNRWA if it were to stop functioning in Gaza. The Commission, as was mentioned by Gert-Jan just a moment ago, takes the recent allegations made by Israel against UNRWA staff very seriously, obviously. We also very much welcome the swift follow-up and the steps taken by UNRWA. We take good note of the termination of the contracts of the staff still alive. We welcome the information that was provided by UNRWA. We welcome the launch of the investigation by the OIOS, as well as the rapid appointment by the UN Secretary-General of an independent review group to assess whether UNRWA is doing everything within its power to ensure neutrality and to respond to these allegations that were made. And as Gert-Jan was saying, we would of course very much appreciate any sort of preliminary reports coming quickly out of these groups. Happy to note that the review group will be led by very distinguished European figures and entities, and that we can place a good degree of trust in the work that is ongoing. We are therefore noting that UNRWA is taking all necessary steps to address the situation. We very much welcome the close dialogue that we are in, and we are confident that UNRWA will provide all of the reassurances needed to donors to allow EU humanitarian funding to continue unabated. I leave it at that. For now, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lorenzo. Thank you, Mr. Koopman. Thank you, Mr. Das, for your interventions. I will now open the floor for questions. We will start with delegation chairs, and special rapporteurs from AFET and DEVE, and afterwards I will give the floor to members from AFET and DEVE committees. Already we have a list of more than 20 colleagues who want to take the floor. So you will understand that I have to be very strict on the time. 2 minutes for the rapporteurs, and the delegation chairs is 2 minutes and not a single second more. Before I give the floor, just one information to everyone in this room. Following an established rule we have for the plenary sessions, declarations of support for contributions from speakers in form of applause is reserved for members only. I now give the floor first to our Chair of the Relations with Israel and the AFET Standing Rapporteur for Israel, Mr. Lopez Isturiz White, but I don't think he's with us. Then I now give the floor to the DEVE Standing Rapporteur on Humanitarian Aid, Carlos Zorinho. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Como se não bastasse uma guerra altamente letal, que já matou mais de 25 mil palestinianos em Gaza, após o ataque terrorista perpetrado pelo Hamas, deparamos agora com acusações graves a funcionários da Agência das Nações Unidas no terreno, que alegadamente colaboraram no ataque. Os acusados foram despedidos, a ONU abriu imediatamente um processo de averiguações, mas isso não impediu que o corte de financiamento por muitos importantes dadores internacionais a esta agência, que desde há muitos anos é essencial no apoio às populações da região e países vizinhos, e sem a qual outras agências e atores humanitários têm dificuldade em agir. A UNRWA é, como sabemos, a única agência internacional a par da Cruz Vermelha que tem estado desde o início do conflito a atuar no terreno, a defender os civis e a prestar ajuda humanitária de emergência, apesar de todas as dificuldades e baixas que já sofreu. Enquanto relator permanente da ajuda humanitária do Parlamento Europeu, apelo às partes, aos jogadores internacionais e aos decisores mundiais que não permitam que morram mais crianças, mulheres, idosos e civis inocentes em Gaza. Eles precisam de nós. Agora e no período de transição, eles precisam da UNRWA e de todo o apoio de primeira necessidade que esta agência ali presta, nomeadamente bens alimentares de primeira necessidade, acesso à água, cuidados básicos de saúde essenciais para a sobrevivência de milhares de pessoas. Pude escutar ontem, no Conselho Informal de Desenvolvimento, em que participei, os esclarecimentos do secretário-geral da UNRWA, Filipe Lazzarini. As medidas tomadas para averiguar, identificar e penalizar os infratores são credíveis. O Parlamento deve seguir com toda a atenção o processo para que as práticas sejam melhoradas e mais fiáveis. Mas a nossa métrica tem que ser as pessoas. E é pelas pessoas e pelos muitos colaboradores isentos e empenhados da organização que a UNRWA tem que continuar a ser apoiada. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Carlos. The Chair for Relations with Palestine, Mr. Manu Pineda, is also not here. So I now give the floor to the AFET Standing Rapporteur for Palestine, Ms. Ibn Inchia. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, chairs. I want to start up with saying thank you to UNRWA for the very important work that you are doing. Colleagues, 28,000 Palestinians, it's not only a figure, but real human beings, most of them women and children, has lost their lives as a consequence of the Israeli government's bombing of every millimeter in Gaza. What we are talking about today is the core of what makes us human. Do we really believe in defending all civilians, or do we not? Do we believe that also the Palestinian lives matters? If the EU and the member states believe that also Palestinian lives matters, and if we really believe in international law, then the contribution, the financial support to UNRWA should continue. I must say that I'm very much ashamed of the member states that have suspended their financial support to UNRWA, especially during a time where UNRWA is more than ever needed, and also especially when the allegations have not been proven. As far as I have heard until now is that there are no proof for these allegations. So I would like to actually turn to the Commission and ask, is there any proof that you have been provided with? Because this feels like a Kafkaesque situation where there are allegations, but there are no proof. Then you expect UNRWA to act on allegations without proof. I must say that I'm very shocked about the whole situation. situation. However, if there are proof, then of course there needs to be robust actions taken, because terrorism must be combated everywhere at any time. But right now there are allegations, no proof, and then we expect UNRWA to act on allegations without proof. This is shocking.
Thank you, Ms. Inchia. I now give the floor to the chair of the AFET Working Group on External Financing Instruments, Mr. David Lega.
Thank you, Chair. Director Lorenzo, I apologize for being blunt, but straight to the point, but I know you know that we have limited speaking time. So, to summarize, highly credible reports have shown that UNRWA staff participated in the horrible terror attacks committed by Hamas on Israel on October 7. And in the UNRWA staff Telegram group, staff members have celebrated these attacks. And the reports also show that 1,200 members of UNRWA's employees are members of Hamas or Islamic Jihad. Recently, we have also learned that Hamas has built tunnels underneath the UNRWA headquarters in Gaza, and that the energy for those tunnels are powered from UNRWA headquarters. I have never heard about a larger failure regarding any humanitarian project. The Palestinians in Gaza need our help. They need an organization that provides food and clean water, not one that participates in terror attacks. They need an organization that provides shelter, not one that is busy celebrating these attacks, an organization that helps the people in need, not an organization that has over 1,000 of its employees being members of terrorist groups. So my question to you is, if this is proven to be true, do you still think that UNRWA should continue to operate? If yes, how much more does it take? When is the limit reached? Do you have a limit? And if no, what organization would you recommend to replace UNRWA in a sustainable way? And Director Lorenzo, I expect a serious answer to my questions, because the European Union, as we know, is one of the largest donors to UNRWA, and we deserve honesty. Thank you.
Thank you. We now come to the list of members. In the moment, we have 22 requests. So let's see how far we can get. The shorter you speak, more colleagues will be able to get the floor. We begin with Michael Gahler for the EPP.
Thank you very much. We are indeed faced with serious challenges. I think the major challenges, of course, when we have more than 2 million people that need to be supplied, how their supply can be guaranteed, independent now what the findings are and who might in future be perhaps replacing UNRWA or not. But for the time being, I think that must be our prime concern, and at the same time, questions that are legitimately asked should be answered. How far certain structures within UNRWA have collaborated. I mean, I'm not a technician or an electrician. If there is a headquarter on top and below there is a tunnel and a headquarters, and allegedly there is some supply of energy from top to down, if that can be cleared and if the responsible people can be held to account, fine. And then we have to see whether UNRWA can continue in the way with new personnel, with new staff, with new responsible people. But apart from that, in the moment when the question is asked whether UNRWA should continue, one must provide the alternative. And for the moment, I have to say, I do not see it yet. And because we have to supply the population that is, I think, indispensable. Otherwise, if it were stopped and there were not the money, international law says that Israel, as the currently again present occupying power, it would fall on Israel to supply the people. That would be the consequence. And I wonder whether one also, friends of Israel, should wish that Israel would be the responsible one to supply it. So my real point is to say, clear up the allegations, but in parallel continue supplying the people as long as it is necessary.
So we will now move on to the first speaker for the DEVE committee, EPP. Mr. Hilben is not here. It's Ms. Benteler replacing him.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ms. Lorenzo, I'm a little bit astonished by your presentation because you're wondering why important donors are withholding their money. It's not only about 12 people being investigated. There's much more. There are tunnels, there are hostages being found in refugee camps, done by UNRWA. So what I absolutely miss, you are just reacting. There is no self-criticism. There's no proactive approach. I mean, you are questions on substance. So I'm really wondering about your presentation. It was very short, just reactive. So I really can encourage you and just enlighten you about the discussion which is ongoing in Germany, which is really tough, to be more proactive and be more self-critical in this regard, because this will not fly, this approach.
Thank you. Now we come to the two S&D speakers. Who would like to replace Tonino Pizzler from AFET? You have to agree among each other. I don't want to interfere. Maria Arena, Nacho Sanchez-Amor, Ms. Gonzalez.
I'm taking this.
Okay. Nacho.
Thank you. Gracias a los colegas. Yo entiendo la preocupación, entiendo la seriedad del caso, entiendo la necesidad de que UNRWA haga lo que tiene que hacer. Quiero recordar que los nombres de estas personas acusadas de haber participado en el ataque pasaron un screening de seguridad de Israel. No solo ha fallado UNRWA. Aparentemente la información es que esos nombres fueron facilitados también a Israel para el screening. Eso supone el 0,04% del staff de UNRWA. El 0,4%. Y la consecuencia es que cerremos la financiación de UNRWA porque un 0,04% ha sido encontrado culpable por el momento provisionalmente de un delito. Colegas, quiero recordarles que el 0,28% de este Parlamento está investigado por el Qatargate. El 0,28, 7 veces más que el porcentaje de personas de la UNRWA envueltos. ¿Vamos a cerrar el Parlamento? ¿Vamos a cerrar el Parlamento porque una exigua minoría de colegas han actuado mal? Esa es la pregunta que tenemos que hacernos. Gracias.
Thank you. The S&D David coordinator is Udo Bullmann. Do you want to speak yourself, Udo, or shall I give the speaking time to you? Okay.
If you allow me to speak, I was so far not indicating, then I will do it in a very quick manner. We have had the chance to listen to a medical doctor from the United States working in one of the last hospitals in Gaza, and she gave us yesterday a fully fledged picture about the humanitarian situation on the ground. And if we now conclude that we cut off money that is deeply needed for those in need in Gaza, I regard this, from my capacity, what I know, as deeply irresponsible. It should not be done. It's totally clear that we have to investigate and that we have to be totally clear about accusations, as was mentioned already by colleagues, but we cannot leave those people alone who need our support in this very minute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Udo Bullmann. We now come to the two Renew speakers. The AFET coordinator, Silde Woutmans. She's not present. Who would like to take the floor from the AFET colleagues from Renew? We have Nathalie Loiseau, Javier Nart, and Soraya Rodriguez Ramos. Please, I don't want to interfere. Ladies first? Okay, Nathalie.
Tout d'abord, je voudrais regretter que le commissaire général de l'UNRWA ait été présent à Bruxelles pour la Commission et le Conseil, mais pas pour le Parlement européen. Aujourd'hui, Gaza s'écroule sous un tapis de bombes, la situation humanitaire y est effroyable. Le Hamas a lancé une guerre et tient la population gazaoui en otage, sans oublier les otages israéliens qu'il détient toujours. La riposte israélienne est évidemment disproportionnée. Les morts palestiniens ne ramèneront pas la vie des morts israéliens. Et nous n'oublions pas que l'UNRWA a payé un lourd tribut dans cette guerre déjà. Tous ici, nous souhaitons que l'aide humanitaire parvienne aux populations et nous savons que votre tâche est difficile. Mais il y a aujourd'hui une perte de confiance dans l'UNRWA et nous ne pouvons pas l'ignorer. La tâche de votre agence est de venir en aide aux populations pour leurs besoins essentiels. Elle n'a jamais été de couvrir l'action des groupes terroristes. On lit que des tunnels du Hamas se trouvent sous des bâtiments de l'UNRWA. Si vous ne pouviez pas l'ignorer, alors pourquoi ne l'avez-vous pas dit? Qu'avez-vous tu, qu'avez-vous laissé faire et surtout quelle action allez-vous entreprendre pour assurer la neutralité qui est attendue de votre agence?
Thank you, Nathalie. For data, the coordinator, Charles Goerens.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Une organisation de la taille de l'UNRWA court toujours le risque d'être infiltrée par des éléments douteux. Ce risque est réel. Il faut enquêter, bien entendu, suite aux allégations qui portent sur une douzaine de ces agents et en tirer les conséquences. Mais de là à couper les vivres à un acteur humanitaire de cette taille est franchement irresponsable. C'est pourquoi j'invite tous les États membres qui ont arrêté, qui ont suspendu leur aide à l'UNRWA, de revenir sur leur décision. L'UNRWA est un acteur impartial. Il n'y a pas d'alternative à son action pour le moment, donc il serait, et je le réitère mes mots, il serait franchement irresponsable de laisser les victimes dans la région du Gaza sans le moindre apport humanitaire.
Thank you, Charles. We now come to the two Green speakers. The first is Jordi Solé for AFET.
Thank you, Chairman. We all agree that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is catastrophic, one of the worst we have seen in recent years, and it will only get worse if the ground operation in Rafah goes ahead. We also agree that the amount of humanitarian aid reaching Gaza is insufficient. We all know that UNRWA is the largest humanitarian provider in Gaza, where virtually all the inhabitants of the Strip rely on it in a way or another. We all know that UNRWA and their shelters are providing refuge for 1.7 million displaced Palestinians. And in this context, instead of debating how we should increase support to the very organization that is providing the lifeline for Palestinians, we are putting the future of this organization at stake. Are we blind? Do we really care about the humanitarian situation in Gaza? Of course, we have to support all the investigations going on. I understand there are 2 investigations right now going on. Measures have been taken. We support full accountability and transparency, but please do not stop financing of UNRWA. This is just the contrary we should be doing right now. In this sense, I have some questions to the representatives of the European Commission. The first one, can you confirm that the payment in the amount of 82 million will be made by the end of February? Secondly, have you conducted an impact assessment on the consequences of stopping aid to UNRWA? And finally, do you think there is any alternative to UNRWA in terms of aid delivery if it collapses due to the lack of funding? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordi. Second speaker for the Greens, Tineke Streek. Or Mr. Guerrero, or... Oh, Caroline Rosa, yeah. Okay, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Tout d'abord, moi, je voulais rappeler que l'offensive israélienne sur Rafah, le principal point d'entrée humanitaire, suscite de graves inquiétudes quant à l'aggravation de la catastrophe humanitaire et les déplacements de populations contraires au droit international. On a, il y a 2 semaines, la Cour internationale de justice qui a enjoint Israël à autoriser l'accès à l'aide humanitaire, fournir les services de base aux Palestiniens et à prévenir et punir tout acte ou incitation au génocide. Dans ce contexte, l'aide humanitaire, déjà insuffisante, est plus que jamais vitale. Et l'UNRWA constitue aujourd'hui la clé de voûte irremplaçable de l'aide humanitaire à Gaza. Alors, suite aux allégations concernant le personnel de l'UNRWA, on voit qu'il y a une enquête qui est faite en cours, qui est indépendante. Mais pendant ce temps-là, il est inadmissible que la réponse d'une partie de la communauté internationale, plusieurs pays dont la France, soit de suspendre l'aide. Pour moi, il est positif de voir qu'en réponse, de nombreux États ainsi que l'Union européenne fassent front pour maintenir justement les financements. Et puis, ce constat posé, j'ai plusieurs questions. J'aimerais savoir quelle serait la durée et la portée des enquêtes concernant l'UNRWA. Est-ce que Israël a fourni les renseignements nécessaires et est-ce qu'elle va coopérer? Quelles seraient les conséquences humanitaires d'un effondrement de l'UNRWA dans la région, notamment dans le contexte d'une offensive sur Rafah? Et deux questions à la Commission. La Commission européenne a-t-elle demandé aux autorités israéliennes des preuves des allégations contre l'UNRWA avant d'annoncer sa position et ses exigences à l'égard de l'UNRWA? Et une dernière question. Que fait la Commission européenne sur le plan diplomatique et pratique sur le terrain pour s'assurer que l'aide humanitaire de l'Union européenne entre à Gaza et est distribuée de manière appropriée? Merci.
Thank you, Madame Rose. For the ECR, it's Bert-Jan Roysen.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Ik moet eerlijk zeggen dat ik werkelijk niet snap dat de Europese Unie nog niet overgegaan is tot opschorting van de financiële geldstroom richting UNRWA in navolging van diverse lidstaten. Omdat de aanwijzingen over verwevenheid van UNRWA met Hamas zich werkelijk opstapelen. We zagen beelden van feestende UNRWA-docenten. Mijn vraag aan mevrouw Lorenza is, wat doen dergelijke beelden met u? En welke maatregelen treft u dan? Staan deze docenten nog steeds op de loonlijst van UNRWA of heeft u maatregelen getroffen? We lezen ook berichten over lidmaatschap van UNRWA-personeel van Hamas. 10% van UNRWA zou lid zijn van Hamas. Wat doen dergelijke berichten met u, mevrouw Lorenza? En hoe garandeert u dat alle banden met Hamas worden doorsneden? Wacht u op het eindrapport, wat wellicht april of mei of zo pas komt, of treft u al eerder maatregelen? En dan de schoolboeken, waarvan duidelijk is dat ze volstaan met antisemitisme. Welke maatregelen treft u daartegen? Hoe kunt u ons garanderen dat de schoolboeken worden opgeschoond? En dan inderdaad ook de berichten over tunnels en datacentra onder UNRWA-hoofdkantoren. Wisten uw medewerkers echt helemaal niks af van deze tunnels en van deze datacentra? U hoort het, ik heb de nodige vragen. Graag wat meer helderheid. Dank.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege. Für die ID-Fraktion erteile ich das Wort Herrn Abgeordneten Zimniok.
Ja, danke, Chair. Wir sprechen hier viel vor dem Aspekt notlange humanitäre Hilfe. Ja, es ist eine humanitäre Katastrophe, die da stattfindet. Aber diese Angelegenheit hat halt noch mehrere Aspekte. Und wir müssen uns auch mal unsere Augen mal Richtung UNRWA richten. Und wenn hier wir von Berichten, die in den Zeitungen stehen, einigermaßen Glauben schenken dürfen, dann sind auch gemäß Wall Street Journal 10% der UNRWA-Mitglieder auf der Payroll von Hamas oder den Islamic Dschihad. Oder wenn man ja UN-Watch schaut, dann haben 3000 der Mitarbeiter sehr enge Links zu Hamas. Jedenfalls diese Links sind nicht wegzuleugnen, dass auch noch welche beteiligt waren an den Anschlägen, dass hier auch eine Telegram-Aktion war, wo man hier Applaus gespendet hat für dieses Massaker. Schulbücher, die Liste ist lang. Da frage ich mich, UNRWA ist Teil einer Hilfe? Nein, oder ist Teil einer Terrororganisation? Und ich glaube, letzteres könnte man eher unterschreiben, wenn man die Aktivitäten sieht. Seien es sehr viele oder seien es sehr wenig. Die Zahlen sprechen für sich. Das kann man hier mal festhalten. Da muss man auch mal festhalten, wer die Geldgeber sind. Warum geht man so blauäugig an diese Aktion ran, spendet an eine Organisation und das Geld fließt in Kanäle, von denen wir überhaupt keinerlei Ahnung und Kontrolle haben? Das ist ja nicht nur blauäugig, das ist ja sträflich. Und wenn wir den Steuerzahler jetzt noch betrachten, dann bezahlt der Steuerzahler auch noch Terroraktionen. Unglaublich. Da ist Aufklärung angesagt, und zwar so schnell wie möglich. Und das dauert einfach zu lange. Die UNRWA hat jetzt seit 48 Hilfen bekommen. Und diesen ganzen Ostkonflikt, damit wurde er auch richtig zementiert. Das ist eine lebenslange Aufgabe, diesen Konflikt zu unterhalten. Damit muss Schluss sein. Wir können zwar für eine Übergangsphase, bis diese Versorgung in Palästina stabilisiert ist, die UNRWA noch finanzieren, soweit, für humanitäre Gründe, aber dann ist sie weg. Denn UNRWA ist Teil des Problems.
Danke, Herr Kollege. For the left, I first give the floor to Mick Wallace.
Thanks very much, David. A couple of questions for Marta. UNRWA's Commissioner General, Philippe Lazzarini, he said he did not probe Israel's claims against the employees before dismissing them. They were fired without evidence. Given that Israel still hasn't produced the evidence and are renowned for telling lies, was your organisation under pressure to abandon the principle of innocent until proven guilty? And my second question to you, Israel wants to make Gaza uninhabitable for a long time now. And is there an acceptance that UNRWA is seen by Israel as an obstacle to the Zionist settler colonial project? That Israel doesn't really want you to exist anymore? Is this something that your organisation feels? And my last point, obviously there's been a lot made of the allegations made against 13 of your 13,000 members, which is an incredibly small figure. And it's amazing if everyone else is actually innocent, which is fantastic. And your organisation deserves incredible credit if all Israel can come up with is allegations against 13 of them. But tell me this, there's over 150 of your staff have been killed by the same Israelis. I mean, what's it like to have come in here to the European Union and listen to people barrage you about allegations against 13 individuals and not to say a word about 150 of your own members that have been murdered by the same Israelis? Tell me what that feels like, please.
Thank you, Mick Wallace. I now give the floor to the left's DEVE coordinator Miguel Urban Crespo.
Gracias, presidente. Que en esta situación de auténtica emergencia humanitaria, de vida o muerte, haya gobiernos de la Unión Europea que han suspendido su apoyo financiero a la UNRWA, no solo es una auténtica vergüenza, sino que tiene un nombre: cómplices de genocidio. Qué casualidad que Israel lanzase las acusaciones contra la UNRWA precisamente horas después de la Corte Internacional de Justicia aceptase que hay indicios de que Israel está cometiendo un genocidio contra el pueblo palestino. Qué casualidad que desde diciembre se conocen documentos internos de Israel en los que se diseñaba una estrategia para desacreditar a la UNRWA y a Naciones Unidas en general. Que en esta sala hoy haya voces que intenten criminalizar a toda una agencia como la UNRWA por unas acusaciones que no han sido ni siquiera juzgadas, responden realmente al intento de agravar el sufrimiento del pueblo palestino y eliminar el hilo de ayuda humanitaria del que depende la vida de más de 1 millón de personas. No lo olvidemos. En Europa tenemos un término para calificar a quienes apoyan a regímenes supremacistas que cometen genocidio. Se llaman colaboracionistas. Yo no solo les pediría que no colaboren en criminalizar a la única organización que asegura la ayuda humanitaria a la población en Palestina, porque si no, seríamos cómplices y colaboracionistas de un crimen.
Thank you, colleagues. This concludes the rapporteurs, the coordinators. What we will do now is I have 12 further colleagues. If everyone sticks to 1 minute, then we can get them all done. But then we really have to close the speakers list. So it's 1 minute each. We kick off with EPP's Anja Haga. 1 minute.
1 minute in Dutch. So maybe some people need a headphone. Wat voor mij staat buiten kijf dat de mensen in Gaza hulp nodig hebben. Die mensen lijden en die moeten we helpen. Maar laten we helder zijn, Hamas gebruikt de inwoners van Gaza als menselijk schild. En vervolgens hebben ze dus hulp nodig en worden ze eigenlijk ook nog gebruikt als pinautomaat. Want vervolgens via de hulp wordt Hamas gefinancierd. Dat kan toch niet waar zijn? En het ergste is, de EU helpt daar dus aan mee. Nu zien we heel veel landen die de financiering stopzetten. Dat kan dus. Maar de EU doet het niet. En ik zou graag een reflectie willen van de Europese Commissie waarom dit niet serieus overwogen wordt. Ik hoor nu reviews, assessments enzovoort wat gaat gebeuren. Maar waarom niet stoppen met financiering? En ik snap natuurlijk, dat zal te maken hebben met dat er ook hulp naar Gaza moet. Dat vind ik ook. Maar dan zou ik ook in die reflectie graag willen horen welke andere vormen van hulp zijn ook mogelijk. Zijn er andere organisaties? Is er hulp mogelijk in praktische zin? Ik zou graag daar meer over horen van de Europese Commissie.
Thank you, Anja. Maria Arena pour the S&D, 1 minute.
Merci. Alors on est aujourd'hui pour débattre du retrait de fonds donné à l'UNRWA et de la responsabilité d'UNRWA dans le cadre des accusations et des allégations israéliennes qui, je le rappelle, n'ont pas été enquêtées. Et on a eu ce matin la présidente du Conseil, Mme Al-Jalabib, qui nous a dit qu'aucune preuve n'a été fournie au Conseil aujourd'hui en ce qui concerne ces allégations. Mais l'UNRWA, effectivement, nous dit à juste titre qu'ils ont initié les enquêtes, les contrôles, mis en place un certain nombre de choses pour justement faire la lumière sur ce qui se passe aujourd'hui et je les en remercie. Avons-nous, comme l'ont dit nos collègues, imaginé le fait que l'UNRWA n'existe pas aujourd'hui dans la situation telle que nous le vivons? C'est intolérable. Mais j'aimerais que AFET puisse avoir la même discussion sur notre position à l'égard d'Israël suite à l'arrêt de la Cour de justice qui a ordonné à Israël des mesures qui sont des mesures conservatoires qui doivent être évaluées dans 1 mois. Alors allons-nous suspendre l'accord d'association avec Israël parce qu'il y a eu un arrêt de la Cour internationale? Merci.
Thank you. Next is Barry Andrews for Renew.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to focus on the timeline issue, in particular, Mr. Copeman, because last time you were here, you told us about the review you were carrying out in October, and you gave us a specific timeline, which is the middle of November, which you stuck to, and then a decision was taken in December to continue with funding, having found no evidence whatsoever of the diversion of funds to purposes for which they were not intended. Now you've provided us with information about 3 measures expected of UNRWA, which essentially is burying them under an avalanche of bureaucracy. First of all, you're requiring a systems audit by EU experts focused on staff. And as Mr. Sanchez-Amor has already said, all of those names were provided to the Israeli authorities in May 2023. You've also required that the Department of Investigation in UNRWA should be strengthened with what? 7 out of 10 of their main funders have now suspended or announced a decision to defer suspending. And you've required a review of UNRWA staff to confirm non-participation. Let's not forget that only 12 members of staff were identified by one of the most sophisticated surveillance organisations in the world, the Israeli Defence Forces. And now you expect UNRWA to carry out an investigation of all of the remainder of its 13,000.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry. Next for the Greens, Tineke Streek, 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I must say that the allegations to UNRWA seem to distract us from the ICJ provisional measures that ordered substantial more relief to the Gazans. And the cynical result of these allegations now is that the funding has only decreased because of the cuts of many countries. So I would like to know from the Commission, also as a follow-up to the ICJ ruling, has the Commission decided to substantially increase the funding? Has it put more pressure on the Israeli government as an occupying power to substantially increase the funding and to make sure that this humanitarian aid is granted to the Gazan people? And is the Commission intending, or is it doing already, putting pressure on the member states who have decided to suspend the funding to reverse these policies? Thank you.
Thank you, Tineke Streek. I now give the floor to Claire Daly. 1 minute.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think all the speakers have said that humanitarian aid and basic services cannot be delivered to Gaza without UNRWA. And in the context of the ICJ ruling then in terms of unimpeded access to humanitarian aid, Have you sought legal advice regarding complicity in the crime of genocide for all of those who have ceased their funding to this area, which, as you've said, is on the brink of famine? Secondly, could you spell out the fact, I think you've all said that nobody has actually seen any evidence at all of the allegations. Could we make that clear? And presuming that that is the case, have you asked Israel why they produced this allegation just immediately after the ICJ, when supposedly they were in possession of it for a very long time? And given that you've put very strenuous demands on UNRWA, I'd like to know what demands you put on Israel. Most particularly, have you raised the fact that they have obstructed the delivery of 84% of aid by UNRWA in advance of this situation or these allegations, and what have you asked them to do?
Thank you. Next for the non-inscrit, Antoni Comín y Oliveres. 1 minute.
Thank you. Sí, sabemos que la UNRWA es la única agencia que es sobre el terreno. Sabemos que la situación humanitaria es desesperada, que empeorará si se confirma la ofensiva israelí sobre Rafah. Y si no hace la asistencia humanitaria la UNRWA, ¿quién la hace? Nadie. Con lo cual, no hay ninguna proporcionalidad entre las comprensibles preocupaciones por la eventual participación de trabajadores de la UNRWA en los atentados que no se han confirmado y la decisión de cortar los fondos. No hay ninguna proporcionalidad. Cortar los fondos cuesta vidas humanas. Es una decisión que tiene consecuencias concretas sobre personas inocentes. Con lo cual es imperativo, primero, que la Comisión confirme la partida de 88 millones que se tenía que consignar a finales de febrero. Y es imperativo que los Estados de la Unión que han cortado la financiación a la UNRWA la vuelvan a activar inmediatamente. No hay ninguna lógica en que 12 trabajadores de la UNRWA fuercen el corte de la financiación en caso que se confirmase su participación a toda la organización. Con esta lógica, todos los gobiernos del mundo habrían cerrado. Todos.
Thank you. Juliana Zofko is next.
Right, I have a question for Mr. Kopman. Mr. Kopman, this is not the first time that UN has compromised itself, first with General Secretary Guterres, who became very ideological in this case instead of playing his role as a true UN General Secretary. And as we are financing, I think, 30% for UNRWA, for this agency, how can we redirect this aid to have some certainty that we are not using UN compromise channels until the United Nations is having thorough investigation of its people, services, what they are doing. And it's not the first scandal. I said again, we had a scandal in Bosnian war, we had a scandal with them everywhere. So it's not the first scandal of United Nations, but I think that Guterres should step down, because he really blew the chance in this historical period to do preventive diplomacy in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Next for the S&D, Ms. González.
Gracias, presidente. Primeramente, gracias a los más de 3.000 colaboradores de UNRWA que continúan en el terreno llevando un poquito de la solidaridad europea. Si creemos que estas más de 28.000 vidas, mayoritariamente niños y mujeres, nos importan, creo que es imperioso blindar nuestra aportación a la UNRWA. Y segundo, también orientar quizás nuestra mirada a que Israel respete lo estipulado en los acuerdos de asociación y, si no, suspenderlo. Creo que cambiar el foco a la UNRWA estaría muy mal. Desde la Unión Europea mantengamos incluso y aumentemos la financiación. Esto es una campaña de desprestigio que no puede llevar a que seamos cómplices de que millones de personas no reciban ayuda humanitaria. Y en concreto, la hambruna que se espera en Gaza para el mes de mayo, si continúan los fondos como hasta ahora, pero por lo que he leído, si estos fondos no continúan, esta hambruna va a llegar mucho antes. Y también me gustaría que pensemos en más de las 5.000 mujeres que van a dar a luz en el próximo mes. Por lo tanto, la hambruna no afecta solamente a esta generación, sino a la generación que continúa. En vez de retirar las aportaciones, reforcemos las aportaciones.
Thank you, madam. Next is Javier Naut. 1 minute.
¿Conoce la Comisión, la exquisita Comisión, la conferencia del 28 de enero en Jerusalén, donde 11 ministros israelíes establecieron que ¿La judaización y el desplazamiento traen la paz? ¿Se acuerda usted de la proposición del ministro de Exteriores de hacer una isla fuera de Gaza para meter a 2 millones de palestinos? Que era un insulto. Segunda cuestión. ¿Quién establece la culpabilidad de esas 12 personas? Y esta exquisita comisión, que sobre 12 personas que no han sido determinada su culpabilidad, y los 152 miembros de UNRWA que han sido muertos bajo las bombas israelíes, ¿no le importa a la exquisita comisión de la Unión Europea? No han hecho ninguna investigación y esto trae la tercera. Tenemos un acuerdo de asociación con Israel. ¿Le parece a la comisión que lo que está ocurriendo en Gaza, que son 28.000 o 29.000 muertos, 37.000 heridos sin asistencia y 8.000 no desaparecidos muriendo bajo los escombros, eso es una conducta democrática de acuerdo con el artículo 2?
Thank you. Next is Mr. Guerrero.
Thank you very much, Chair. On the allegations, I thank you the UNRWA clarifications, and we hope for the clarification also of the investigation. But I would like to go to the facts. 156 members of the UN were killed. Only 6 units of health of the 22, if I'm not mistaken, of UNRWA are working. A lot of schools have been bombed and destroyed, and so this poses a question. Should we also make an investigation? This question is for the Commission. Should we also make an investigation on the destruction of these infrastructures? Because this is also EU funds, and I see a lot of colleagues worrying about the misuse of EU funds. This is also EU funds, so we should also have an investigation. And if so, if we have an investigation, if the donors should be refunded, if there's a proven fact that these were deliberately destroyed, not helping those who are most in need, there are Palestinians. And also regarding UNRWA, thank you for all the work, because it's a life situation, and we should continue the support of UNRWA, financing more, not less. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final 2 speakers. First, Anna Michelle Asimakopoulou.
Thank you very much. No question about the humanitarian crisis and how bad it is. Apparently, there's some questions about whether these allegations are true. That's valid. I mean, we obviously want to get to the truth. But I can't imagine these are not allegations that somebody took the humanitarian aid and sold it on the black market so there can be restitution, like Mr. Koopman said. What's restitution for participating in one of the worst massacres that have ever happened? Restitution to whom and what? So let's see if they are true. I'm going to move to the next step right away. Suppose we find out, if we find out that it is true, that there's 12 people who participated and 10% of the staff is somehow involved with Hamas, and 3,000 people were clapping, and there's tunnels under UNRWA, then what, nothing? Nothing? I'm the one who said we need to put conditionality on textbooks. Nothing if this is all true? Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Soraya Rodriguez Ramos.
Gracias, presidente. Me gustaría preguntar al señor Kaufmann si, a partir del momento en el que el Tribunal Internacional de Justicia declaró plausible que se está cometiendo un genocidio en Gaza por el gobierno de Israel y adoptó medidas cautelares para proteger a la población civil y que entrara la ayuda humanitaria, ¿están haciendo seguimiento o están en contacto con las autoridades israelíes para ver cómo están adoptando estas medidas? Me gustaría también saber si tiene la Comisión pruebas evidentes más allá de los 6 folios que presentó Israel en relación a las acusaciones del personal de la UNRWA. Y si es así, me gustaría que efectivamente nos las explicara. Finalmente, a la señora Marta Lorenzo me gustaría preguntarla si puede realmente especificar en vidas humanas lo que supone la retirada de los fondos de la UNRWA, porque los ciudadanos en Europa tienen derecho a saber qué se hace con sus fondos, con el dinero público, pero también derecho a saber qué coste en términos de vidas humanas, de vidas que pueden estar en peligro por la retirada de decisiones de sus gobiernos en un contexto de genocidio en curso.
Muy bien, muy bien.
Right, colleagues, as always, a number of colleagues have been overlooked, so I continue giving the floor. In the moment, I have Karen Melchior, and then Mr. Bütikofer, and the gentleman next to Mr. Bütikofer? Mr. Saturi. Who else? I mean, look, can you... Okay, look, I am just going by the list. Perhaps you can write down all the names in the meantime. Do we have interpretation till when? Well, anyhow. Ms. Melchior.
Thank you very much. This is an extremely politicized conflict. We have UN organizations working in other conflict areas. Is there a risk of an excessive control of UNRWA hindering their work? So I would like to ask both DG NEAR and DG ECHO is the control of UNRWA comparable to the control of other UN organizations working in conflict areas, providing humanitarian aid? And I would like to ask UNRWA, Madam Lorenzo, does UN organizations have investigatory powers to investigate parties in a conflict in areas where the UN is providing humanitarian aid? Because a number of colleagues have asked why UNRWA has not been doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Köster.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. First of all, I would like to underline there are really serious accusations against UNRWA. These allegations, although they are not proven, cannot be underestimated. We need a full and comprehensive inquiry. It is obvious that UNRWA must change something. Sustainable reforms for the organizations are needed. My key question is, how could the organization of the United Nations like UNRWA ensure the delivery of vital goods to the Palestinians without cooperating with Hamas? And how can this problem be managed? And is it possible that UNRWA does not know anything about the tunnels, although they were built under UNRWA schools? A human solution is needed, where the Palestinians can be provided with the necessary goods, but it must be excluded that UN organizations are involved in any terror attacks or terror organizations. Israel must respect humanitarian law. Hamas must lay down their weapons and they must surrender to overcome this dire situation. Then UNRWA can do its work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Köster. So, we still have Ms. Auken, Mr. Saturi, Mr. Bütikofer. Can I now close the list? No names have been overseen. The list is closed, and don't even come up with an idea to take the floor. Ms. Auken, 1 minute.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this debate. It's very interesting. I just want to stress one point. We got the verdict from ICJ recently, and if you read that in a proper way, it says clearly that Israel should make sure that we don't get any more killings, contribution to the genocide. And it says very clear also that the help must be provided now. And I think that what we are doing, if we are not taking ICJ serious, we are undermining, and I think really that's the stake for the moment, the whole international legal system. I've been contacted from many sides, what is happening in the EU, because it's one of the best things which has happened since World War II is the international legal system, and now we are just neglecting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Auken. Monsieur Saturi.
Eh bien, merci de me donner la parole. Je voulais demander à la représentante de l'UNRWA, évidemment que j'ai compris que les fonds étaient essentiels et qu'il faut qu'un certain nombre d'États membres reviennent sur leurs décisions, voire qu'on augmente le soutien. Mais tout à l'heure, M. Das a dit que nous sommes ici à l'Union européenne pour un accès de l'aide humanitaire sans obstacle. De quoi avez-vous besoin, une fois que les fonds sont garantis, pour que l'aide humanitaire arrive de manière efficace, pour que vous puissiez faire face aux désastres humanitaires que connaît la région sur place? Tout à l'heure, M. Kopman a dit que les allégations prouvaient qu'il fallait qu'il y ait plus de contrôle. Je comprends l'idée, mais je veux préciser que les allégations ne prouvent rien. Des allégations n'ont jamais rien prouvé. Je sais bien que dans le cas d'Israël et de Gaza, le droit international est remis en question. Je ne veux pas que les principes élémentaires du droit tout court soient remis en question. Des allégations ne prouvent rien. Par contre, ils obligent, sans doute, à puisque c'est la réputation même de l'agence qui est remise en cause, ils obligent à des contrôles pour pouvoir rassurer un certain nombre de partenaires. Comment est-ce qu'on peut être sûr et avoir la preuve d'enquête extérieure? Est-ce que la Cour pénale internationale, par exemple, pourrait être un partenaire au-dessus de tout soupçon qui pourrait sur place enquêter et apporter la crédibilité dont on a besoin?
Mr. Bütikofer.
Thank you, Chair. I see two discussions here. One is about whether we can responsibly argue that the work of UNRWA should be stopped now because of the allegations against the backdrop of the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And there my answer is no. The second is about whether we think that UNRWA displays a responsible attitude with regard to the severe accusations at hand. And there my answer is also no. They display the same kind of self-righteous reactiveness that they have displayed in the past when they were criticized over not being as neutral as they should be. I see no single reason why Mr. Lazzarini, after not having been capable of effectively enforcing a strict line against complicity with Hamas genocidal terrorism, should not draw personal consequences if he wants to support the work of the organization that he has dishonored.
Thank you. That closes the list of questions from MEPs. We will now give our guests, of course, an opportunity to give us comprehensive answers. The time is, of course, even the important topic limited. What's the point of order, Mr. Andrews?
Given the huge number of questions and the limited time available, could the witnesses undertake to provide written answers to the deputies who've taken the time to prepare their questions so that we will get full answers to this very important issue?
Okay. I think it is clear that that could be, if you find that you don't get your answers in the answers, this could be one of the solutions to follow up, of course. But now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Lorenzo for UNRWA. The plan is 5 minutes. Let's see.
I'll do my best. First of all, thank you to all that have shown support to the agency. I will definitely convey this message to these 13,000 staff members in Gaza that are working with dedication. I also want to thank to those of you who have doubts on the agency for asking these questions. It is important that we are given the space to clarify. And maybe let me perhaps start with this. On the different allegations on tunnels, the 10%, etc., or even the allegations on the 12 staff members, I think I have heard many questions on was there proof or not? Why did we terminate the staff without going through a due process? Well, precisely because the allegations were serious enough, very, very serious, for an organization that does not tolerate any kind of hate or incitement to discrimination or of course, also not engagement with militarized groups. This is the very reason why our Commissioner General decided to terminate the contracts. Were we given proof? The answer is no. We were not given any evidence, and this is in fact what we are requesting from the government of Israel, to fully collaborate with the investigative team that is on the ground to provide this evidence. We want clarity the same as you all want clarity. On the tunnels, some of you have mentioned the issue of do you have the mandate, do you have the skills, the capacity to investigate? Well, the answer is no UN agency, not UNRWA, no other UN agency has this mandate. We are not a state. We do not have police forces or intelligence services to be able to know what is happening after working hours. But let me reassure you that the vetting process has happened. Let me reassure you that we make checks, we share these names of staff repeatedly with Israel and with other host countries hoping that the host countries and Israel will cooperate with us in determining whether there is any political affiliation or people who might be engaging in illicit activities. We have done this repeatedly, and these 12 names, as I said, were in the list that was shared. Many of the reports that you are reading are the same reports that we are reading. We hear in the media. They are not communicated to us directly by the Israeli authorities. It is very difficult, based on media reports, to investigate allegations, yet we do it. Even on other reports that have been published before, for example, on the alleged celebration of the 7th of October attacks, we have looked into them, and on the 32 names that were mentioned in this report, 15 were not even UNRWA staff. They have been investigated, and the remaining number is now under investigation. When we take disciplinary measures, they can go all the way from suspension to termination, and we have done that. This is on allegations. I wish I had more time to go through more details, but maybe it's important to highlight that we operate in a high-risk environment. And for 16 years in Gaza, we have been left with an impossible task of delivering humanitarian assistance and basic public services within a political and security vacuum. This is very important to understand. No UN agency is able to fill a political and security vacuum, and we have been providing services under this very high-risk environment. On the consequences of the suspension, I think figures speak by themselves, and we need to look at the immediate, what will happen in Gaza if UNRWA goes away. But we also need, and I'm going to quote my Commissioner General, what he said yesterday, we should not be short-sighted. We should think that there will be a moment in which there will be a ceasefire. We should think of who is going to be taking over the Gaza Strip, who is going to be able to provide basic services, and how are we going to manage this transition? I think this is very important because no other UN agency is able to provide public-like services. Who is going to bring back 500,000 children to the education system? Who is going to be able to do that while there is a new governance being established? I think this is very important, and it's very important also to think on the implications in the region, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, the West Bank. Let's not forget that the situation in the West Bank is very, very unstable. If we cease our operations, more instability will come to the region, and I would even say to Europe. I think there was a question on by when these reports will be available. These are independent investigations. The first investigation is on the 12 alleged staff involved in the attacks. We have heard that perhaps a preliminary report would be available within 4 weeks, but this needs to take time, the time that it needs to look into these very serious allegations. When it comes to the review, it's again an independent review. We think it's going to take about 2 months, and we are hoping that this will answer some of the questions that you have asked today on whether UNRWA's control systems and UNRWA neutrality framework, and I should highlight that perhaps we are the only UN agency that has a neutrality framework and has been investing consistently in preventing breaches on neutrality. Once again, working in a very high-risk environment. I hope our staff being killed, our health centers destroyed. Yes, we are operating in a very difficult situation, and day by day we hear very difficult stories from our colleagues on not being able to deliver assistance. I have mentioned at the very beginning how difficult it is to deliver assistance to the north. But it is very difficult, as offensive and as the conflict is intensifying, to all of a sudden move all your teams from the western part of Khan Younis to the southern part of Rafah and start all over again. Even our own staff do not know whether they would be able to stay where they are, and they have to choose to leave their families behind and come to work, which is not a very easy decision. As I mentioned the example of a mother of 5, she has to leave her 5 children behind to be able to come to work and deliver assistance, and in very, very uncertain times. Let me go through my questions, briefly. There were many that should UNRWA continue to operate, and is there anybody that can take over? That would be my last remark, because I think that has been asked several times. Well, let me tell you what happens, for example, with vaccination today in Gaza. Vaccines enter from Rafah to the Gaza Strip, donated by UNICEF, but of course UNICEF cannot make them get to the children. It is through the network of the health centers, and it is through the medical teams of UNRWA, the wide network, the 13,000 staff, the infrastructure, the logistics, that we are able to get aid delivered. So it is very important to think that whatever might replace UNRWA will need to have a similar infrastructure, and you will need to be able to have also the local personnel and the community acceptance to be able to deliver aid. I'm going to stop there. I know that there are many questions, and I apologize for those that might feel disappointed because I haven't had enough time to respond to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koopman.
Thank you very much. Listen, there are many, many questions, so I will answer a few here and the rest in writing. I think the first point I want to make is that these allegations are extremely serious, and the fact that they are extremely serious is evidenced by the way UNRWA itself is responding to it. So please forgive the Commission for being at least as serious as UNRWA in its response to these allegations. What we have asked UNRWA to do is actually something UNRWA has indicated to us it is willing to entertain. It's important that we have robust control systems. And the 3 points that we have asked UNRWA to agree to are all very much within the remit of protecting the budget, its integrity and its reputation. They do not, in my view, pose any insurmountable operational risks to UNRWA's capacity to deliver. Obviously, we have no interest in undermining UNRWA's capacity to deliver, because if we were to do that, we would simply be obviating the need to support, and that is not what we want to do. So we're going through this rapidly in good collaboration with UNRWA, trying to operationalize these requests fully within our role as implementing the EU budget. Secondly, we are doing that because the allegations are very serious. I have not said, and I think there was one honourable member who quoted me as suggesting that these are demonstrations of evidence. I have not said that. The Commission has not said that these allegations are true. We just consider that they are so serious that they require a robust follow-up. Secondly, many questions about Israel, whether the Commission and the EAS, the High Representative, have communicated to Israel about the situation in Gaza. I think I can confirm that we have done so. The President of the Commission, the High Representative, these are important issues. They are definitely also issues which are raised by our leaders of the Member States who visit Israel. The Commission's budgetary support of Israel is very, very limited, as you know, and the allegations that we are looking at in the case of UNRWA do not pertain to financial support to Israel. So in that sense, the support, the limited support that we provide is also not affected by these matters. I would pick up on a question that was asked about the degree of robustness of the controls in relation to the risks and whether there are other UN organizations that are subject to similar controls. I would broaden the question a little bit. The issue here is what the appropriate level of controls is in an environment that is very risky. And the general rule is that as the riskiness of the environment in which the budget is dispersed increases, the controls also increase. So you will find that the controls that the Commission has put place in Syria, for example, are much more intrusive, provide many more layers of defense than the controls which we apply in environments that are less risky. And you heard Marta explain just how difficult the situation in Gaza is, and therefore it is appropriate that the budget is protected through stricter controls in Gaza than elsewhere, obviously without impeding the effectiveness of the disbursement of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Das, finally.
Thank you very much. Interesting debate indeed. Let me focus on the questions related purely and specifically to humanitarian aid. And of course, we share very much the concern expressed by many of you about the humanitarian situation in Gaza and the need to continue to provide humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. The position of the Commission on this particular point is very, very clear. It was stated in the statement of the 29th of January. Humanitarian aid must continue, will continue, unabated through financing to the partner organizations. And as I explained in my initial intervention also, UNRWA plays a key role in the humanitarian infrastructure in Gaza. There were questions around what is our analysis of the impact of stopping funding of UNRWA, what are the alternatives, etc. And I can be very honest and open on that. Our analysis is that there is no credible alternative to UNRWA from a strictly humanitarian point of view at this moment in time. That is also the feedback we are receiving from partners on the ground. For the provision of humanitarian aid, UNRWA is the backbone and plays a very important role. Of course, that doesn't mean that accountability should play no role. Obviously, it does, and that's where the dialogue with UNRWA is extremely important. We need to continue that dialogue to restore confidence and to bring all clarity and accountability to allow that indispensable, vital humanitarian aid funding to continue. On the control standards that we apply to UNRWA, I can just add to what Gert-Jan just mentioned, that UNRWA was pillar assessed. That was done in 2022 and a few years before that also. So we are applying the same standards to UNRWA as to other UN and Red Crescent and Red Cross organizations. But obviously, UNRWA is working in a particularly high-risk environment, as they also mentioned themselves. And we're very welcoming of the fact that they are taking a very critical look themselves at how things are being done, setting up all of these audits and investigative bodies. And we're very ready to continue to work with them on that. On the humanitarian side, no payments are due before the end of the month, and we will continue the conversation along the lines I just explained. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you to all our guests for your replies today. I think it is clear that UNRWA plays a central role in providing assistance to Palestinians in the region, and particularly in Gaza. It is, of course, important to establish the truth behind the allegation and also have a solid assessment of the allegations of UNRWA. I'll leave it to others to assess the replies. I will not try to summarize that. But with that, we're actually done for today. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And to all AFED colleagues, we will continue immediately with the next item on our agenda, item number 11, which will be chaired by Zeliana Zovko.